I still think about this sometimes, especially on rainy nights when the house is too quiet. It happened back in 2017, and even now, it makes my stomach tighten when I replay it in my head. That night, I was 38, and I was home with my younger sister Lily, who had just turned 21. We weren't mother and daughter, just sisters who had always been close. At the time, we were living together in a small rental house on the edge of Willow Creek, a sleepy little town where everyone pretends nothing bad ever happens. Most of the house was old, not charming old, more like creaky floors, thin walls and doors that never felt as solid as they should. The backyard was fenced, but only barely. The wood was warped and leaning in places, and the gate never latched right. Beyond the fence was a stretch of trees that always looked darker than they should, even during the day. That night, it was just the two of us. My roommate Mark was working a late shift, and Lily's boyfriend had gone out of town. The weather was miserable. Cold rain had been falling since sunset, tapping steadily against the windows and pooling in the yard. The kind of rain that makes everything feel cut off from the rest of the world. Lily was in the kitchen baking brownies, humming to herself and stealing spoonfuls of batter when she thought I wasn't looking. The kitchen light was warm and yellow, and for a while, everything felt normal. Safe, even. I leaned against the counter and talked to her about nothing important. Work stuff. A show we'd been watching. The kind of boring conversation you don't think twice about. At some point, I glanced at the clock on the stove and realized it was a little after 10:30 p.m. I remember thinking how late it had gotten without me noticing. I told Lily I was going to take a quick shower before bed. She nodded, still focused on the oven. My bedroom was at the back of the house, with a small bathroom attached. I shut the door, turned on the shower, and let the water heat up. The sound of it filled the room, steady and loud, drowning out everything else. That's probably why it took me a second to hear Lily calling my name. At first, it was faint, almost like I imagined it. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. She wasn't yelling. She was whispering, but there was panic in her voice. The kind that makes your heart jump before your brain catches up. I shut the water off and listened. "Claire?" she whispered again. "Claire, please." I didn't even bother getting dressed. I grabbed my robe, tied it with shaking fingers, and stepped out into the hallway. Lily was standing just outside the bathroom, pale and wide-eyed. "There's someone outside," she said. Her voice was barely above a breath. "On the back porch." "He's knocking." That didn't make sense. Our back porch wasn't visible from the street. You had to walk through the yard, past the broken gate, and around the side of the house to get to it. No one ever went back there unless they lived with us. My chest felt tight as we walked toward the kitchen. The house suddenly felt too open, like there were too many dark corners. The back door was solid wood, but there was a narrow window beside it, covered only by thin curtains. The knocking came again. Slow, heavy, 3 solid knocks that echoed through the kitchen. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. A man was standing there, right up against the door. He was tall and broad, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. Rainwater dripped from the edges of it. In one hand, he held a large, sagging bag. The other hand was raised, ready to knock again. Something about the way he stood made my skin crawl. He wasn't shifting or pacing like someone unsure of themselves. He was perfectly still, like he'd been there longer than we realized. Before I could stop myself, I called out, "Hello?" His head lifted slightly, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment. "Hey," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "Can you open the door for a second?" My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Who are you?" I asked. "What do you want?" He didn't answer the question. He just leaned closer to the door. "It's raining," he said. "I just need to talk to you." Every alarm in my body was screaming. Normal people didn't do this. Normal people went to the front door. Normal people didn't ask to be let inside by strangers at night. Do you know someone who lives here? I asked, louder now. He paused, just for a moment. Then he said, I'm looking for a girl. She lives here. I think you're her sister, right? Lily grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. I could feel her shaking. I don't know you, I said. You need to leave. The man let out a small laugh, like I'd said something funny. Come on, he said. Just open the door. I promise I won't come in. I just want to see her. That was when I realized something that made my blood run cold. From where he was standing, he could see straight into the kitchen window if the lights were on. He could have been watching us bake, watching us talk, watching us move around the house. I wanted to call the police right then, but my phone was still on the bathroom counter. I swallowed hard and tried to sound braver than I felt. You need to leave now, I said. I'm calling the cops. His smile vanished. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring through the glass. I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but I could feel them on me. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Even the rain seemed quieter. Finally, he stepped back, slowly. He turned and walked toward the steps leading down from the porch. I didn't move until he disappeared around the side of the house. Then I ran to the living room window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see the yard. The man crossed the wet grass, his bag swinging at his side, and slipped through the broken gate like he'd done it before. When he was gone, Lily and I just stood there, holding on to each other, listening. Every little sound made us jump. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the rain against the roof. When Mark got home later, we told him everything. He checked the yard with a flashlight, but there was nothing. No footprints we could see. No sign anyone had been there at all. We barely slept that night. For weeks after, every knock, every shadow, every sound outside made us tense. We added locks. We installed lights. But the feeling never fully went away. Sometimes I still wonder how long he'd been watching before he knocked. And that thought is what really keeps me up at night. This happened a few years back, in the fall of 2016, when I was 22 and thought my phone and a good GPS signal could get me out of any situation. I was wrong about that. I was driving alone to meet my cousin Mark and his girlfriend Jenna for a long weekend getaway. We'd rented a place we found online, somewhere way out past Red Pine Hollow, a rural stretch of land a couple hours north of where I lived. It was supposed to be peaceful, quiet, a place with no neighbors where we could unplug for a few days. The rain started just outside the city and never let up. Not a gentle rain either. This was the heavy kind that slams into your windshield so hard it feels personal, like the sky is mad at you. Everything outside my car blurred together. Trees turned into black smears. The road looked like a long strip of wet oil. There were no streetlights out there. No houses, no cell service. Just me, the sound of the rain, and the GPS voice calmly telling me where to go, like nothing was wrong. Turn right in 500 feet. I slowed down, leaning forward in my seat, squinting through the glass. My wipers were working as fast as they could, but they weren't winning. When my headlights finally caught the turn, my stomach tightened. It was a skinny gravel driveway, barely more than a break in the trees. Two thick walls of forest pressed in on either side, branches hanging low like they were trying to reach the road. A crooked mailbox stood at the entrance, numbers peeling off, barely readable. It looked close enough to the address Mark had texted me earlier. I told myself this was normal. Country places always looked creepy at night. That didn't mean anything. A gravel popped and cracked under my tires as I turned in. The sound was way louder than I expected, echoing into the trees. The deeper I went, the darker it got. My headlights barely reached past the rain, and the driveway felt longer than it should have been. Then the house came into view. It was a small, single-story place with siding that had seen better days. The porch sagged slightly in the middle, and one yellow porch light buzzed and flickered like it was struggling to stay awake. A rusted SUV sat parked out front, angled crookedly, like whoever parked it didn't care how it looked. This was not what I remembered from the listing photos. Still, I figured the pictures were probably old. Or edited. Rain had a way of making everything look worse. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain drum on the roof. Something felt off, but I ignored it. I jogged up to the porch, already soaked, and knocked. The door opened immediately. Not a second of delay. A man stood there, late 40s maybe, big shoulders, thick arms. He wore a faded work jacket that looked damp around the collar, like he'd been standing in the rain before I arrived. His face was rough, unshaven, and his eyes locked onto mine the second the door opened. Then I noticed what he was holding. A shotgun. He didn't point it at me. He didn't smile either. He just stood there, holding it casually, like it was part of him. My heart slammed so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was low and flat, like he was already annoyed. I'm sorry," I stammered. "I think I messed up. I'm supposed to be meeting my cousin." "The GPS said, wrong place," he said, cutting me off. There was no hesitation, no confusion, just certainty. "Turn around," he added, "and leave." I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I nodded, mumbled another apology, and backed down the porch steps as fast as I could without tripping. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. By the time I got back into my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. Rain soaked through my hoodie as I slammed the door shut and locked it, even though I knew that wouldn't help. I started the engine and glanced up. He was still there, standing in the doorway, shotgun hanging at his side, watching me. I threw the car into reverse. The tires spun in the mud, spraying wet gravel. As I turned around, my headlights swept across the front of his SUV. That's when I saw her. Someone was sitting in the back seat. At first, my brain didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it clicked, and everything inside me went cold. It was a girl, young, maybe 16, maybe even younger. Her hair was plastered to her face, dark with rain or sweat. Her skin looked gray and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were pulled behind her back, wrapped tight in duct tape. And her mouth was covered with thick silver tape. Her eyes were wide, not panicked, just empty, like she was already too tired to scream. For a split second, our eyes met. Then my headlights moved on. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gas pedal down and tore back down the driveway. The car fishtailed wildly, gravel flying everywhere. I was sure I was going to hit a tree or slide straight into a ditch. The rain was coming down so hard, I could barely see 10 feet ahead. I kept telling myself, just get back to the main road. Just get out. That's when headlights exploded in my rearview mirror. The SUV. I never heard the engine start. 1 second the driveway was empty. The next, he was coming after me. Fast. My GPS froze, the map spinning uselessly like it had given up. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't slow down. The SUV closed the gap quickly. Its headlights bounced wildly as it chased me, lighting up the trees on either side like something was hunting me through the woods. The gravel turned into cracked pavement, and I pushed the car harder than I ever had. The speedometer climbed. My hands were slick with sweat. Every curve felt like it might be the one that killed me. My phone rang. It was my younger sister, Lily. I must have hit a patch of signal without realizing it. I answered and yelled, "Lily, call the police, right now." "What?" "Why?" she shouted back. "He's chasing me," I said. "There's a girl. He's got a girl in his car. Please, just call 911. Behind me, the SUV blasted its horn, long and angry. The sound cut through the rain and went straight through me. I could barely hear Lily anymore. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned everything out. Up ahead, I saw it. A narrow dirt lane breaking off into the woods. No sign, no lights. Just a dark gap between trees. I made a split-second decision. I turned off my headlights and swerved hard. The car slid and caught. I rolled a short distance into the mud and stopped. I shut the engine off and held my breath. I sat there, frozen, listening. Seconds later, the SUV roared past on the main road. Its headlights flashed through the trees, sweeping over my car for a terrifying moment before disappearing into the dark. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited until my chest hurt. After what felt like forever, I started the car again and drove slowly in the opposite direction, back toward civilization. I didn't stop until I reached a brightly lit convenience store miles away. I was shaking so badly I could barely speak when I asked the clerk to call the police. They came fast. Faster than I expected. I told them everything. An hour later, one of the officers came back to me, his face tight and serious. They found the SUV. They found the girl. Alive. The man was gone. Vanished into the woods behind his house. They never caught him. I still think about that night. About how close I came to driving away without looking. About how easily I could have trusted the GPS and never questioned it. Every time it rains hard, I remember those eyes in the back seat, and I don't drive back roads at night anymore. Back in 1998, I was 24 and working the late shift at a printing warehouse just outside a little town called Ridgeway Crossing. It wasn't a place people passed through unless they had to. No mall, no highway. Just trees, old farms, and long stretches of road where your headlights felt like the only real thing in the world. That night, it had been raining since mid-afternoon. Not the light, polite kind either. This was the heavy, soaking rain that crawls into your shoes and makes everything smell like wet dirt and rust. By the time I clocked out around 10, the parking lot was flooded in spots, and the sky hung low and purple-gray, like it was pressing down on everything. I drove a beat-up green pickup back then. The heater barely worked, and the wipers squealed every time they moved, like they were complaining about being alive. As soon as I pulled onto County Road 11, I knew it was going to be a long drive. That road was empty on a good day. At night, in the rain, it felt forgotten. No streetlights, no houses for miles. Just woods packed tight on both sides, branches leaning in like they were listening. I'd driven that route almost every night for 2 years. I knew every bend and pothole. Still, something felt off. The radio kept losing signal, fading in and out, and the rain sounded louder than usual. Thick, heavy, like it was hitting the truck harder than it should. About halfway home, my headlights caught something up ahead on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a mailbox or maybe a broken signpost. Then it moved. There was a man standing just past the curve, rain pouring down his back. He lifted one arm slowly and waved, not frantic, not rushed. Just steady, calm. That alone made my stomach tighten. I slowed without really deciding to. The closer I got, the clearer he became. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark coat that clung to him like a second skin. The hood was pulled low over his face. He looked like he'd been standing there a long time. I passed him by a few feet before stopping. My heart was already racing. I told myself I didn't have to help, but I also knew if I didn't stop, I'd replay it all night. Wonder who he was. Wonder what happened to him. I cracked the window just enough for my voice to carry. "You okay out there?" He stepped closer, boots sinking into the muddy shoulder. Rain hammered the hood of my truck. When he spoke, his voice sounded scraped raw. "Truck died," he said. "Been walking forever. You headed toward Marrow Creek?" That was the next town over, about 10 minutes from where we were. I hesitated long enough to feel stupid, then nodded. "Yeah, get in." "You're gonna freeze." He didn't thank me right away. Just opened the door and climbed in, fast, like he didn't want to give me time to change my mind. The door shut with a heavy thud. The smell hit me immediately. Wet clothes, old sweat, something metallic, like pennies. Cold air filled the cab, and for a second, it felt like the temperature dropped. "Appreciate it," he said quietly, rubbing his hands together. They were red and scraped, little cuts along the knuckles, like he'd fallen more than once. I told him my name was Evan. He said his was Caleb. He didn't look at me when he said it. His face was pale, almost gray under the dashboard light. Short hair, uneven, like he'd cut it himself. His eyes were dark and alert, darting around the cab like he was memorizing it. We drove in silence for a minute before I asked, "Where'd Truck die?" "Near the old gravel pits," he said. "Engine just quit. No warning. That was already weird. Those pits were miles back, way farther than he'd made it seem." The road narrowed as we went deeper into the trees. Rain slapped the windshield so hard it blurred everything into streaks of silver. The wipers couldn't keep up. "You pick people up a lot?" Caleb asked. "Not really," I said. "Tonight just felt wrong to leave someone out there." He smiled a little at that. "That's kind of you." Something about the way he said it made my shoulders tense, like he was testing the words before using them. We talked a bit, or tried to. He asked where I lived, who I lived with. I told him I shared a small house with my older cousin Mark, who worked nights too. I noticed he didn't offer much back. No details, just short answers. At one point, I caught him staring at me, not at the road, at my reflection in the side window. "You sure you don't want me to drop you at the gas station?" I asked. "It's open late." He shook his head. "Nah, you can take the next left. There's a place I can wait." I knew that turn. Everyone around there did. It led to an old service road swallowed by trees. No buildings. No lights. "That's not the way to Marrow Creek," I said. He turned slowly to face me. "It's fine. I know where I'm going." My pulse jumped. I forced a laugh. "I'm just heading straight into town." His hand slid toward his coat pocket. The fabric made a soft crinkling sound. I felt my mouth go dry. "Relax," he said. "Just need a smoke." He pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Lit one. The flame lit his face for half a second, and in that moment, his eyes looked wrong. Too focused. Too sharp. "You ever hear about the kids who disappeared out here?" he asked suddenly. "No," I said, though I had. "They said someone helped them," he continued. "People always trust helpers." My heart started pounding so loud, I thought he could hear it. "You missed the turn," he said again. "I'm not going that way," I replied. My hands were tight on the wheel. He smiled. Slow. Empty. "You really shouldn't have stopped." That's when I saw it. The shape in his pocket. Hard. Metallic. I didn't think. I yanked the wheel. The truck slid sideways, tires screaming. He shouted. Something sharp scraped across the dashboard. I slammed the brakes, threw my shoulder into him. The knife clattered to the floor. I shoved him out into the rain, locked the doors, and hit the gas. As I sped away, I saw him in the mirror, standing there, smiling, rain pouring down like he'd never been cold at all. I didn't pick up strangers after that, and every time it rains hard, I still think about that road, and the way he waved, calm, patient, like he knew someone would stop eventually. I'll tell it the way I tell it now, the way you might tell it to someone late at night, when the room's quiet and you're not sure why you feel uneasy. This happened a few years ago, back in 2018, when I was trying to finish a writing project I'd already been procrastinating on for too long. I rented a small cabin in the woods because it was cheap and far away from everyone I knew. I didn't want distractions. I wanted quiet. Just me, my laptop, and a few days of rain and isolation. The place was listed online under the name Megan, who said she was the owner. We'd never met. She wasn't a friend or even a friend of a friend, just someone renting out a property. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow gravel road outside a tiny town called Ridge Hollow, surrounded by tall pine trees that leaned together like they were listening. The listing promised peace and quiet. It mentioned a backup generator, a small porch, and rustic charm, which usually means something's broken, but they don't want to say what. I didn't care. I packed food, an old flashlight, my phone charger, and drove out there just before sunset. The sky was low and gray when I arrived, like it was pressing down on the trees. The cabin was smaller than the photos suggested. One main room, a loft you had to climb into, a tiny kitchen, and a sliding glass door at the back that faced the woods. The trees were so close they felt like they were crowding the windows. It started raining almost immediately, slow at first, then heavier. The kind of rain that makes everything smell wet and metallic. I texted Megan to let her know I'd arrived. She replied quickly and told me to message her if the Wi-Fi went out. She said storms sometimes knocked it offline. I had just sat down to eat when someone knocked on the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just a normal knock, like a neighbor asking to borrow something. I remember freezing with my fork halfway to my mouth. Nobody was supposed to be out there. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man stood under the porch light. His jacket was soaked through, water dripping from the hem. He looked older, maybe late 50s, scruffy beard, gray hair plastered to his forehead. At his feet sat a black tool bag. I didn't open the door. I asked who he was. He smiled like that was funny and said his name was Caleb. He told me he used to help take care of the place and was stopping by to check the generator before the storm got worse. His voice was calm, friendly, like he'd done this 100 times. Something about that bothered me, like he'd practiced sounding harmless. I cracked the door just enough to keep the chain on. The smell hit me right away. Wet fabric and oil. He pointed toward the side of the cabin and said it would only take a minute. I don't know why, but I stepped outside with him. Rain soaked my hair immediately. He knelt by the generator and opened it, like he knew exactly where everything was. He talked to himself while he checked it, quiet muttering, like he didn't even notice I was there. When he finished, he told me everything looked good and walked off without asking for anything. No signature, no phone call, nothing. I locked the door and texted Megan, casually mentioning that her maintenance guy had stopped by. Her reply came fast. She said she hadn't sent anyone. She said she didn't know anyone named Caleb. That was the first moment my chest tightened. I locked everything again, deadbolt, chain, windows. I turned off the porch light and stood by the side window, watching the driveway. The rain erased everything. No footprints, no tire tracks, just mud and darkness. The power went out about 20 minutes later. The generator kicked on by itself, just like it was supposed to. The low hum filled the cabin. The lights flickered back on. The Wi-Fi didn't. I tried to distract myself. I typed. I told myself it was fine. That maybe Megan had forgotten to mention the guy. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, someone pacing. The doorknob turned slightly. Not enough to open it. Just enough to test it. I stood there holding my phone, barely breathing. Then came the sound that still makes my skin crawl. Fingers dragging across the window. Not knocking. Not tapping. Dragging. I called 911. The dispatcher's voice was steady and kind. She told me help was on the way, but it would take time. The roads were bad. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey, sorry, it's me again. Forgot something." No smiley. No explanation. The generator shut off soon after. The cabin went dead silent. No hum. No lights. Just rain and my own heartbeat. I heard him outside again, this time closer. On the side of the cabin, near the propane tank. I realized then that I'd shown him exactly where everything was. He knocked again, then started talking through the door. Soft, apologetic, then laughing quietly, and angry. His voice kept changing. Like different people were taking turns. He said my name. First wrong, then right. That's when I knew he'd looked me up before he ever knocked on my door. The sliding glass door rattled. Something metal scraped. The frame shifted. I pressed my body against it, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. Then headlights flashed through the trees. Voices shouted. A taser popped. Everything went quiet again. The police found him behind the cabin. He had multiple IDs. Spare keys, tools, photos of the place from years ago, back when it belonged to someone else. The generator hadn't failed. He'd shut it off. I didn't sleep there that night. I didn't finish my writing either. Sometimes people ask what the lesson is. I don't have one. I just know that some places don't forget the people who used to belong to them. And sometimes those people come back, convinced they still do. I still don't like driving when it rains. Not because of slick roads or bad visibility. It's because of that night. This happened in 2016, back when I was living in a small town called Briar Hollow. The kind of place where everyone recognizes your car, but doesn't always know your name. I was 22 then, working odd jobs, saving money, trying to figure out what came next. I used to house sit, not babysit. House sit. That's important. The family trusted me because I was friends with the wife's younger cousin. That's how I knew them. Not close friends. Not strangers either. Just close enough that they felt comfortable handing me a key. Their names weren't Parker. Let's call them Lena and Chris Holloway. They lived outside town, down a long gravel road that branched off Old Mill Route. No streetlights, just trees. Tall ones, thick ones. The kind that lean inward when the wind picks up, like they're listening. The Holloways had 2 kids. Evan, who was 7 and talked nonstop about dinosaurs, and Lucy, who was 4 and slept with the light on because she said the dark whispered to her. I'd stayed overnight at their place twice before. Nothing strange. Just a quiet house, creaky floors, and the sound of the wind pushing through the woods. That night was different from the start. Lena and Chris were tense while getting ready to leave. Not arguing, just off. Lena kept rubbing her wrist like it hurt. Chris checked the locks more than once. When he handed me the garage code, he hesitated, like he almost changed his mind. They said they'd be back around 10. They weren't. Around 9, the rain started. Not a gentle rain. The kind that slaps the roof and makes everything outside disappear into noise. I put the kids to bed, sent Lena a quick message, and curled up on the couch with my phone and a blanket. That's when my phone rang. Lena's name came up on the screen. She told me they were running late, said the roads were flooded, and they were waiting it out somewhere. Her voice sounded flat, not tired, not stressed, just empty, like she was speaking through a tunnel. I remember listening harder than I should have. No clinking dishes, no music, no voices in the background, just a low humming sound and a slow, steady clicking. I asked if they were okay. She said yes, too fast. We hung up, and I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being dramatic. Then, about half an hour later, I heard it, a sound underneath the rain, a deep, steady rumble, An engine. I pulled the curtain back just enough to look. Their SUV was in the driveway, running. Lights off, wipers moving slow, exhaust drifting up in pale clouds. No one inside. I stood there way too long, staring like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. I called Lena back. Voicemail. I texted, "Are you home?" A minute later, she replied, "Still out. Roads are awful." Why? That's when my skin went cold. I didn't open the door. I didn't step outside. Something in my chest told me not to. I locked every door again, even the ones I knew were already locked. Then the motion light over the porch turned on, and stayed on. I heard footsteps. Slow ones. Careful. Like whoever it was didn't want the gravel to crunch. There was a scrape against the door. Not a knock. Not yet. Just pressure. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Open the door. Another message followed right after. Front door. Then, now, I didn't answer. I took the kids upstairs, barely waking them, and locked us in the bathroom, because it was the only room with a solid lock and no big windows. Evan asked what was happening. I told him it was just the storm. Lucy started crying anyway. Downstairs, the door handle turned. Slow. Testing. Then it stopped. Red and blue lights flashed through the bathroom window a few minutes later. A man's voice called out, saying he was with the county sheriff's office. Said there'd been a report about a suspicious vehicle. He sounded calm. Friendly, even. Too friendly. I didn't open the door. I called emergency services instead and asked them to confirm someone had been sent. They said yes. One unit? When I asked if he had a partner, they said no. Outside, the man tried again. Asked me to open up so he could make sure everyone was safe. Through the upstairs window, I watched him walk to the SUV. He opened the back hatch. Whatever he saw inside made him stiffen. He ran back to the house and started pounding on the door. That's when another vehicle pulled in. Different engine, louder, official, state police. Everything happened fast after that. Shouting, radios crackling, someone running, someone being restrained. The SUV belonged to Lena and Chris. They were inside it, alive, barely. Later, an officer told me the man in uniform wasn't who he said he was. He'd worked the area before, knew the family, knew their routines, had access, had copies of keys. He'd taken Lena's phone and used the car system to call me while standing just outside the house. That humming sound? The car. The clicking? A relay inside the vehicle. He'd been there the whole time, watching, waiting for me to open the door. I didn't. The family survived. They moved away, changed everything. I quit house sitting. Sometimes, when it rains hard enough, I still think I hear an engine idling somewhere close. And every time I check my phone and see an unknown number, my stomach tightens. Because the scariest part wasn't the storm, or the car, or even the man at the door. It was how calm he sounded. Like he knew, sooner or later, I'd let him in. It was meant to be an easy weekend, nothing special. Just me and my nephew Caleb, heading out to my uncle's old lake house so his parents could have a break. This was back in 2014, when everyone still thought getting away from their phones for a couple days was a good idea. The house sat way out past Pine Hollow, miles from the nearest gas station, tucked between thick trees that always made the place feel darker than it should have been. Caleb was 12 then, skinny kid, quiet, but observant in that way kids are when they're paying attention to things adults miss. His parents thought a few days in the woods would be good for him. Fresh air, no screens, just peace and quiet. That was the plan anyway. The drive took almost 4 hours. The last stretch was a narrow gravel road that twisted through trees, so close together Their branches scraped the sides of the car. Halfway down that road, the sky opened up. Rain slammed down hard, like someone had dumped a bucket over us. The wipers barely kept up, smearing everything into gray streaks. That's when Caleb leaned forward in his seat. "Aunt Mara," he said, pointing. "There's someone out there." At first, I thought it was a fallen branch or a shadow playing tricks on us. But then I saw him. A kid stood off to the side of the road, half in the ditch. He looked about 16 or 17, maybe older. It was hard to tell. He wore a dark jacket soaked through, the fabric clinging to him like a second skin. His hood was up, but rain ran straight down his face anyway. He wasn't waving. He wasn't asking for help. He was just standing there, swaying slightly, like he might tip over any second. My stomach tightened. "Don't stop," my brain screamed. But Caleb was already unbuckling. "He's freezing. We can't just leave him." I slowed down, heart pounding. There was no cell service, no houses, just trees and rain and that kid staring at the ground. I cracked the window. "Hey," I called out, "you all right?" Slowly, painfully slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes looked wrong somehow. Not glowing or anything dramatic, just too focused, like he was staring straight through me. "I just need somewhere dry," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in a while. "My place is not far." Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but leaving him there felt worse. "Get in," I said. "Back seat." He opened the door and climbed in without another word. Water poured off him onto the seats. He smelled like wet leaves and something sour underneath, like old sweat. Caleb offered him a hoodie from his bag. The boy took it, his hands shaking more than they should have. "Thanks," he said. "Name's Rowan." Something about the way he said it stuck with me. Too flat, too careful. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Every now and then, I caught Rowan staring at us in the rearview mirror. Not glancing, staring. The lake house sat at the end of a rutted driveway, barely visible behind the trees. It creaked when we opened the door, like it didn't want us inside. Rain drummed on the roof, loud enough to drown out the forest sounds. I handed Rowan a towel and pointed to a chair. "You can warm up by the heater." He sat, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, towel hanging loose in his hands. His shoes left muddy footprints across the floor. I noticed then how thin he was. Not just skinny, hollow. Caleb tried to make conversation. Asked about school, music, normal stuff. Rowan answered politely, but vaguely. Never named a town, never mentioned family. When I asked where his parents were, he paused too long. "They're not around," he said. That's when my phone buzzed. One message from my sister. "Are you alone?" Then another, right away. "Lock the doors. Turn on all the lights. The police just issued an alert." My chest went cold. Escaped juvenile inmate. Violent history. Last seen near Pine Hollow Road. Male. Teen. Wearing a dark jacket. I looked up. Rowan was watching me again. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. "You get bad news?" he asked. I forced a laugh. "Just family stuff." My hands shook as I typed back under the counter. "He's here. What do I do?" Her reply came fast. "Get Caleb somewhere safe. Don't let him know you're scared." Caleb asked if Rowan wanted to see the lake out back. I cut him off too fast. "Why don't you help me grab blankets from the bedroom?" I said. Caleb followed me down the hall. As soon as we were inside, I shut the door and locked it. "What's going on?" he whispered. I crouched in front of him, gripping his shoulders. "Listen to me. Stay quiet. Don't open this door. No matter what." Footsteps creaked in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. The knob turned gently. "Mara," Rowan said through the door. His voice was calm now. Too calm. "You don't have to hide." Caleb started to cry. I covered his mouth, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The knob rattled harder. The door shuddered. Then silence. Minutes passed. Maybe seconds. I didn't know. I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. The front door stood wide open, rain blowing inside. Blue lights flashed through the trees. Rowan stood on the porch, hands raised, rain plastering his hair to his face. Deputies shouted commands. He didn't resist, didn't argue. As they cuffed him, he turned and looked at me. This time, he smiled. Later, one of the officers told us Rowan had attacked a guard and vanished into the woods 2 days earlier. They'd been following muddy footprints right up to the driveway. That night, after the rain stopped, the woods went quiet. Too quiet. Caleb sat beside me, wrapped in a blanket. He didn't look scary, he said softly. I stared at the dark trees beyond the window. They never do, I said. And even now, years later, when it rains hard enough, I swear I can still hear footsteps on gravel outside. This happened back in 2016, when my cousin Evan and I decided to take a long road trip together. We weren't a couple or anything like that. We grew up close, more like siblings, and after a rough year for both of us, we needed to get out of town and clear our heads. A few months before the trip, we bought this tiny, beat-up camper from a guy outside Red Hollow, Missouri. It was white once, but the paint had gone dull and chalky. The thing was square, awkward, and barely tall enough to stand up in. Still, it felt like freedom. We could park almost anywhere, lock the door, and call it home for the night. At least, that's what we thought. One evening, we pulled off a narrow service road in eastern Oklahoma, following a sign that promised free camping. Calling it a campground was generous. It was really just a wide gravel loop with 2 warped picnic tables and a rusted fire ring full of old ashes. Trees crowded in on all sides, tall and dark, like they were leaning in to watch. The map said there was a lake nearby, maybe half a mile into the woods, but by the time we arrived, it was already pitch black. You couldn't see anything past the tree line. The weather report had mentioned light rain, nothing serious. Instead, the sky opened up. By the time we parked and climbed into the camper, rain was slamming down so hard it felt like someone was throwing handfuls of gravel at the roof. Wind shoved at the sides, making the whole thing creak and sway. Branches scraped against metal with long, slow squeals. The only other vehicle, there was an old pickup parked way across the loop. No lights, no camper, no movement. I remember joking that maybe someone had gone night fishing and got caught in the storm. Even as I said it, my stomach tightened. Who goes fishing in weather like that? Inside the camper, everything felt smaller, warmer but tighter. Evan hung a little battery lantern from a hook above the bed, and we sat there reading, trying to pretend the storm wasn't getting worse. Rain on a camper roof doesn't sound normal. It's loud, sharp, and constant, like the noise is inside your head instead of outside. Thunder rolled so close it rattled the windows. Sometimes it cracked so hard the air felt like it punched my chest. Around 11, we shut off the lantern and lay back. The rain settled into a steady downpour, almost soothing for a minute or two. Then came the knock. Not a bang, not pounding, just 3 soft taps on the door. Tap, tap, tap. We both froze. I didn't say anything at first. I waited, holding my breath, telling myself it was just the wind or something falling off a tree. Then it happened again. Same rhythm. Same calm spacing between the knocks. Evan whispered my name and asked if I heard it. I nodded. A camper door had a small window, but rain streaked down it, so thick you couldn't see anything beyond the glass. I reached for the flashlight we kept near the sink, my hands shaking more than I wanted to admit. Nothing happened for a moment. Just rain, just thunder. I pulled the curtain aside, and shined the light out. The beam bounced off wet gravel and puddles glowing white every time lightning flashed. No one was there. I told Evan it had to be a branch. They didn't answer. I could tell they didn't believe me. We lay there, tense and quiet. Every sound felt wrong. The wind pushed against the camper, making the walls groan. Somewhere outside, something loose slapped against metal over and over. Thunder rolled closer, not farther away. About 20 minutes later, the knocking came back. 3 taps. Soft, careful. This time, there was no pretending. Someone was standing right outside our door. I sat up too fast and smacked my head on the cabinet. Evan grabbed my arm and whispered for me not to open it. I wasn't going to. I just needed to check the lock. When I touched the handle, it was cold, wet, like it had just been touched. The door was locked. I shined the flashlight again. Trees, rain, mud. Then I saw movement near the bottom of the door. Something sliding. I told myself it was water dripping. We stayed awake for hours. The knocking didn't return, but the feeling did. That heavy sense that someone was standing just outside, waiting for the storm to cover their sounds. Every time the thunder faded, I swore I heard splashing footsteps moving slowly through puddles. At some point, exhaustion won. I don't remember falling asleep. When I woke up, everything was gray. The storm was gone, replaced by thick fog that wrapped around the trees and pressed close to the camper. Water dripped steadily from branches overhead. The world felt muted, like sound didn't travel properly. Evan was already awake, sitting up and staring at the door. Their face looked tight and pale. We dressed without talking. I stepped outside first. Mud sucked at my shoes. The air smelled like wet dirt and rotting leaves. The campground was empty. No truck, no people, no tire tracks except ours. Then I turned back toward the camper. The door was covered in muddy handprints. Not a few, dozens, small ones. Some were smeared, like whoever made them had slid their hands down the metal. Others were perfectly clear. 5 fingers, tiny palms. Too small to belong to an adult. Evan came out behind me and froze. The mud was thick and dark, the kind you find near the edge of a lake. The handprints trailed down the door, across the steps, and then just stopped. No footprints, no path leading away. It looked like someone had pressed their hands there again and again, trying to get inside. We packed up fast. I wiped one print with a rag, and it left a dark streak that smelled like swamp water. When we pulled onto the road, fog swallowed the camper almost immediately. We didn't talk until we reached a diner miles away. I tried to explain it. Kids, a prank, something logical. Evan reminded me there were no houses anywhere near that road. That night, we stayed in a motel. When rain started again, I lay awake listening, waiting for 3 soft taps. Over the next week, we kept trying to make sense of it. Nothing fit. Animals don't leave handprints like that. People leave footprints. A few days later, I bought a cheap motion light with a camera and mounted it above the camper door. We avoided that whole region after that. 3 weeks later, in southern Alabama, another storm rolled in. Same heavy rain, same wind. We parked behind a gas station that allowed overnight stays. Around 2 in the morning, the motion light flashed. The camper rocked slightly, like someone leaned against it. I checked the camera feed. Rain, light, nothing else. I went outside. Fresh handprints covered the door, smaller than before. When we checked the footage later, there was nothing but static and faint tapping sounds. We sold the camper 2 months later. I still have a screenshot from that camera. One clear handprint near the handle. Every time it storms now, I swear I hear it. 3 soft knocks. Waiting. I'm going to start by saying this up front. I still don't like being alone in quiet places. Not after what happened. Back in 2016, I used to spend a lot of time out in the woods during hunting season. Mostly whitetail. Nothing extreme. It was just something I did to clear my head. I worked construction back then. Long weeks, loud job sites, people everywhere. When fall came around, I needed space. I had a small hunting cabin about an hour and a half outside Ridgewood, tucked deep in the trees near an old logging road nobody used anymore. It wasn't anything you'd brag about. One room, a narrow bed pushed against the wall, a rusty wood stove that popped and hissed when it got too hot. The roof leaked when the wind came in from the north, and the back window never fully latched, no matter how many times I fixed it. Still, it was mine. I'd usually go up there alone, but sometimes my cousin Evan would tag along. He was more into hiking and photography than hunting, but he liked the quiet. That weekend, though, I was on my own. Evan had just started dating someone and bailed last minute. It was early November when I drove up, cold enough that your breath stuck around in the air. I planned to stay 2 nights, reset feeders, swap SD cards from the trail cameras, maybe sit in the stand for a few hours if the weather held. It didn't. By the time I got there, the sky had already turned that dull gray color that means rain is coming whether you like it or not. I unloaded my gear, lit the stove, and told myself I'd head back the next morning if things got bad. Around dusk, the rain started. Soft at first, just enough to tap on the roof. Then it got heavier, louder, the kind of rain that makes the woods go quiet, like everything living has decided to hold its breath. I made instant coffee and pulled out my old laptop. I figured I'd kill some time by checking the trail cam footage. Most of it is junk. Honestly, leaves blowing, raccoons sniffing around, the occasional blurry deer butt. I popped in the SD card and started clicking through. Nothing interesting. Nothing interesting. Nothing. Then I noticed a clip stamped 8:06 p.m. That caught my attention because it was already dark out when I arrived, and I hadn't checked the time. I clicked it. The video showed the front of the cabin, same as always. The porch, the trees behind it, rain streaking diagonally across the lens. Then I saw someone walk into frame. It was me. Same jacket, same beat-up boots. Same way of walking, shoulders slightly forward, like I always do when it's cold. I watched myself climb the porch steps, stop at the door, and turn back like I was checking the woods. I remembered that. Clear as day. I locked the door, tugged on the handle once, then went inside. I actually laughed. Just a quiet little breath through my nose. I figured the camera must have caught me right before I came in. Then I noticed the next clip. Same date. 8:11 p.m. 5 minutes later. I hadn't gone back outside. I clicked play. At first, it looked like nothing was happening. Just rain and darkness. Then a thin beam of light slid across the ground. A flashlight. It traced over the mud near the porch, paused, then moved again. Someone stepped into view. My stomach tightened immediately. He was wearing my jacket. My hat. Same height, same shape. Even the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other was wrong in a familiar way. Like watching your reflection move half a second too late. The man walked up onto the porch. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. I leaned closer to the screen without realizing it. The camera mic picked up a faint metallic click. The deadbolt. Then the motion sensor triggered the porch light. For just a second, I saw his face. It was my face. Same crooked nose from when I broke it years ago. Same beard, trimmed uneven, because I never get it right. Same little scar under the chin. But the eyes were off. They didn't blink. They weren't curious or cautious. They looked calm, confident, like he already knew how this would end. He looked straight at the camera and smiled. Not a big grin. Just enough to show he knew he was being watched. Then he opened the door and walked inside. The video ended. I snapped the laptop shut so hard it hurt my hand. The cabin was suddenly too quiet. I checked my watch. 8:19 p.m. That meant the thing in the video was already inside. With me. I stood up slowly and grabbed the rifle from where it leaned against the wall. The generator hummed outside, steady and loud, and for the first time I hated the sound. It felt like it was announcing where I was. I walked to the door and checked the deadbolt. Locked. My hands were shaking. I told myself it had to be some kind of trick, a reflection, a coincidence, someone messing with me. Then I heard it, a soft click from behind me. The sound of a window latch lifting. I killed the generator, and the lights went out instantly. The darkness felt thick, like it pressed against my eyes. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, and lightning flashed through the windows. In that flash, I saw him, standing near the stove. Not moving, not breathing, just standing there like he'd been waiting. I yelled. I don't even remember what I said. My voice cracked halfway through. Another flash of lightning lit the room, and he was gone. The door behind me creaked. I spun around, rifle raised, heart slamming in my ears. Nothing, just the door swaying slightly from the wind. I locked it again and backed away. The rain on the roof sounded heavier now, slower, like footsteps pacing above me. I tried calling for help, but there was no signal, same as always. I thought about running to the truck, but the idea of opening that door made my chest tighten, so I stayed. Then I heard scraping, metal on wood, from under the floor, the crawl space. I'd completely forgotten about it. The latch rattled once, twice. I aimed the rifle at the floor and shouted that I wasn't joking, that I would shoot. The latch popped open. A hand came through first, pale, dirty, fingernails cracked and black. Then another. The wood groaned as something pulled itself up. His face appeared in the beam of my flashlight. My face, but twisted. Smiling wide now, teeth too white, eyes shining with something that felt wrong to look at. I fired without thinking. The sound was deafening. The figure dropped back down, hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. I slammed the hatch shut, hooked it, and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the truck. The sheriff met me later that night. Deputies searched the cabin. Underneath it, they found signs someone had been living there. A sleeping bag, food wrappers, old batteries. Even my cousin Evan's lost camera, which I had no idea was missing. They never found the man. The last trail cam clip, recorded after everyone left, showed the cabin quiet and dark. Then the door handle turned. From the inside,